Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Sickly Bernice's Tap House. We're going to do some more reading today. When last we left off, we finished reading the great story of the Wolf Queen. Today, I have no fucking clue what we're going to read, so I'm going to find out what the fuck we're going to read. Let's go, we're going to go back up towards the top of the list over here. I think we're going to do, if I can find it, History of the Fighters Guild, 16 pages, alright. History of the Fighters Guild. In the 283rd year of the Second Era, potentate Versidue Shahi was faced with a disintegrating empire. The vassal kingdoms throughout Tamriel had reached a new height of rebellion, openly challenging his rule. They refused his taxes and led sorties against the imperial garrisons throughout the land. At the destruction of his fortress in Dawnstar, he gathered the Imperial Council in what would be called the Council of Bardmont, after the town south of Dawnstar where they met. There, the potentate declared Catholic, and universal martial law. The provinces of Tamriel would dissolve their armies or face his wrath. The next 37 years were perhaps the bloodiest, and that's completely unsurprising. Were perhaps the bloodiest in the violent history of Tamriel. In order to crush the last of the royal armies, Versidue Shahi had to sacrifice many of his best legions, as well as spend nearly every last piece of gold in the imperial treasury. But he accomplished the unthinkable. For the first time in history, there was but one army in the land, and it was his own. The problems that immediately surfaced were almost as staggering as the triumph itself. The potentate had impoverished the land by his war, for the vanquished kingdoms had also spent the last of their gold in defense. Farmers and merchants alike had their livelihood ruined. Before, the princes of Tamriel would not pay his taxes. Now they could not. The only persons who benefited from the war were criminals, who preyed upon the ruins of the lawless land, without fear of arrest now that all the local guards and militia were gone. That's a crazy fucking thing to imagine, huh? It was a crisis the Akavir had seen coming long before he destroyed the last of his subjects' armies, but for which he had no solution. He could not allow his vassals their own armies again, but the land was deeper into the stew of anarchy that it had ever been before. His army sought to fight the rise of crime, but a central authority was no threat against the local underworld. In the dawn of the year 320, a kinsman of Versidue Shahi, Dineris Ves, the Iron, presented himself with a host of companions before the potentate. It was he who suggested an order of mercantile warriors for hire, who could be hired by nobility in lieu of a standing army. The employment would be temporary, and a percentage of the fee would go to the potentate's government, thus putting salve on two of Versidue Shahi's greatest pains. Those then called the Sifim, after the Tsiki's word for soldiers, the organization that was to be known as the Fighters Guild had been born. Dineris Ves the Iron initially believed that the entirety of the order should be composed of Akaviri. This belief of his is not disputed by any historian, though his motivation is often debated. The traditional, simple explanation is that he knew his countrymen well, trusted them, and felt that their tradition of fighting for profit would be of use. Others believe, with reason, that he and the potentate sought to use the order to effectively complete the conquest of Tamriel, begun over 500 years earlier. When Akavir attacked Tamriel in the 2703rd year of the First Era, they had been beaten back by the Riemann dynasty. Now they had a potentate on the throne, and with Dineris Ves's machinations, the local armies would also be Akaviri. What they had failed to do by combat, they would have successfully accomplished by patience. A traditional stratagem, many scholars suggest, of the immortal snake men, the Tsiki of Akavir, who always had time on their side. How long do snakes live for? I don't think they live that long, but okay. The point, however, is largely academic. Though the Sifim did establish themselves in some kingdoms neighboring Cyrodiil, it became quickly apparent that local warriors were needed. Part of the problem was simply that there were not enough Akaviri for the work that needed to be done. Another part was that the snake men did not understand the geography and politics of the regions they were assigned. It was evident that some non-Akaviri were needed in the Siphon, and by the midpoint of the year, 3 Nords, a warrior sorceress, a rogue, and a knight were admitted into the order. The knight, whose name has been lost in the sands of time, was also a great armorer, and probably did more to strengthen the organization than anyone but Denarus Vess himself. As has often been stated, the Akaviri, particularly the Tsiki, understood weaponry better than armor. Even if they could not wear it themselves, the knight was able to explain to the other Siphon what the weaknesses were in their opponent's armor, explaining to them how many joints there were in a pauldron and a greave, and the differences between akatons and armcations, gorgets and glide trims, palettes and pass guards, tabards and tassets. I butchered all those fucking words. To think that my light armor and heavy armor skills are at 100. With this knowledge, they made long strides in defeating the brigands, doing far better than their meager numbers would suggest. It is a joke among historians that if Akavir had a Nord armorer in their employ in the First Era, they would have won the invasion. Wow. What a funny joke. The success of these first 3 outsiders to the Siphon opened the door for more local members. Before the year was through, Denarus Vess had spread his business throughout the Empire. Young men and women, for a variety of reasons, because of desperate poverty, for love of action and adventure, in order to aid their crime-stricken neighbors, joined his new order en masse. They received training and were immediately put to work helping the aristocracy's problems, assuming the roles of guards and soldiers within their locality. The early success of the Siphon in combating crime and defeating local monsters so inspired potentate Versidue Shai that he entertained representatives from other organizations interested in imperial sanction. Though formed much earlier, the Mages Guild had always been viewed with suspicion by the government. In the 321st year of the Second Era, the potentate gave his approval to the Guilds Act, officially sanctioning the mages, together with the guilds of tinkers, cobblers, prostitutes, scribes, architects, brewers, vintners, weavers, rat catchers, furriers, cooks, astrologers, healers, tailors, minstrels, barristers, and the Siphon. In the charter, they were no longer called the Siphon, however, bowing to the name it had become known as by the people. They were to be called the Fighters Guild. All the guilds, all those that followed by later sanctions throughout the Second and Third Eras, would be protected and encouraged by the Empire of Cyrodiil, recognizing their value to the people of Tamriel. All would be required to pay to expand their influence throughout the land. The Empire was strengthened by their presence, and the Imperial coffers were filled once again. Shortly after Versidue Shai's death, only 3 years after the Guild Act, his heir, Severian Shovik, allowed the reforming of local armies. The Fighters Guild was no longer the principal arm of the local aristocracy, but their worth had already been established. Though there were certainly strong individuals who sought their own fortunes in the past, many historians have suggested that Denarus Vess was the ancestor and spirit of the modern phenomenon of the adventurer, those men and women who dedicated their lives to questing for fame and fortune. Yes, I think we know what the fucking adventure is. Thus, all owe a debt of gratitude to the Fighters Guild, not only its members and the people who have been helped by its neutral policy of offering strong arms for a fee within the boundaries of the law. Without them, there would be no guilds of any kind, and it may be argued, no model for even the independent adventurer. Wow, well, good thing that the fucking potentate took over the fucking empire, huh? Wasn't that such a great thing? Alright, let's just make our way down the line. How Orsinium Passed to the Orcs by Menina Gsost. The year was Third Era 399. Standing on a mountainside overlooking a vast tract of land between the lands of Menevia and Wayrest was a great and learned judge, an arbitrator and magistrate, impartial in his submissions to the law. "You have a very strong claim to the land, my lad," said the judge. "I won't lie to you about that. But your competition has an equal claim. This is what makes my particular profession difficult at times." "You would call it my competition," sneered Lord Bowen, gesturing to the orc. The creature, called Gortwag Nagorm, looked up with baleful eyes. He has ample documentation to make a claim on the land, the magistrate shrugged, and the particular laws of our land do not discriminate between particular races. We had a Bosmer regency once, many generations ago. But what if a pig or a slaughterfish turned up demanding the property? Would they have the same legal rights as I? If they had the proper papers, I'm afraid so, smiled the judge. The law is very clear that if two claimants with equal titles to the property are set in deadlock, a duel must be held. Why? Why a duel, bruh? Now the rules are fairly archaic, but I've had opportunity to look them over, and I think they're still valid. The Imperial Council agrees. What must we do? Asked the orc, his voice low and harsh, unused to the tongue of the Cyrodiils. The first claimant, that's you, Lord Gortwag, may choose the armor and weapon of the duelists. The second claimant, that's you, Lord Bowen, may choose the location. If you would prefer, either or both of you may choose a champion, or you may duel yourselves. The Breton and the orc looked at one another, evaluating. Finally, Gortwag spoke. The armor will be orcish, and the weapons will be common steel longswords. No enchantments, no wizardry allowed. The arena will be the central courtyard of my cousin Lord Berilith's palace in Wayrest, said Bowen, looking Gortwag in the eye scornfully. None of your kind will be allowed in to witness. So it was agreed. Gortwag declared that he would fight the duel himself, and Bowen, who was a fairly young man and in better than average condition, felt that he could not keep his honor without competing himself as well. Still, upon arriving at his cousin's palace a week before the duel was scheduled, he felt the need to practice. A suit of orcish armor was purchased, and for the first time in his life, Bowen wore something of tremendous weight and limited facility. Bowen and Berilith sparred in the courtyard. In 10 minutes' time, Bowen had to stop. He was red-faced and out of breath from trying to move in the armor. To add to his exasperation, he had not scored one blow on his cousin, and had dozens of feinted strikes scored on him. I don't know what to do, said Bowen over dinner. Even if I know someone who could fight properly in that beastly steel, I couldn't possibly send in a champion to battle Gortwag. Berilith commiserated. As the servants cleared the plates, Bowen stood up in his seat and pointed at one of them. You didn't tell me you had an orc in your household. Sir, whined the elderly specimen, turning to Lord Berilith, certain that he caused offense somehow. You mean old Tunner, laughed Berilith. He's been with my house for ages. Would you like him to give you training on how to move in orcish armor? Would you like me to? Asked Tunner obsequiously? Unknown to Berilith, but known to him now, his servant had once ridden with the legendary Cursed Legion of High Rock. He not only knew how to fight in orcish armor himself, but he had acted as trainer to other orcs before retiring into domestic service. Desperate, Bowen immediately engaged him as his full-time trainer. You're trying too hard, sir, said the orc on their first day in the arena. It is easy to strain yourself in heavy mail. The joints are just so to let you to bend with only a little effort. If you fight against the joints, you won't have any strength to fight your foe. Bowen tried to follow Tunner's instructions, but he quickly grew frustrated, and the more frustrated he got, the more intensity he put into his work, which tired him out even quicker. While he took a break to drink some water, Berilith spoke to his servant. Water? I don't think I've ever seen... There's not even an option to drink water in this game, huh? It's only fucking alcohol. That's great. Alcohol and potions. That's all we thrive on. We don't need no fucking water. While he took a break to drink some water, Berilith spoke to his servant. If they were optimistic about Bowen's chances, their faces did not show it. Tunner trained Bowen hard the next 2 days, but her ladyship Elisora's birthday followed hard upon them, and Bowen enjoyed the feast thoroughly. A liquor of poppies and goose fat, and cock tinch, what the fuck is that? With buttered hyssop for a first course, roasted pike, comb wort, and balls of rabbit meat. Oh, jeez, okay. Okay. Not balls of rabbits, just balls, circular pieces of rabbit meat. Okay, for a second. Sliced fox tongues, balam pudding with oyster gravy, batagler weed and beans for the main course. Coquive, ice and sugar fritters for dessert. As Bowen was settling back afterwards, his eyes wary, he suddenly spied Gortwag and the judge entering the room. "What are you doing here?" he cried. "The duel's not for another 2 days." Lord Gortwag asked that we move it tonight," said the judge. "You were training when my emissary arrived 2 days ago, but his lordship, your cousin, spoke for you, agreeing to the change of date." "But there's no time to assemble my supporters," complained Bowen, "and I've just devoured a feast that would kill a lesser man. Cousin, how could you neglect to tell me?" "I spoke to Tunner about it," said Berileth, blushing, unused to deception. "We decided that you would be best served under these conditions. The battle in the arena..." That's funny. The battle in the arena was sparsely attended, saturated with food. Bowen found himself unable to move very quickly. To his surprise, the armor responded to his lethargy, rotating smoothly and elegantly to each stagger. The more he successfully maneuvered, the more he allowed his mind, and not his body, to control his defensive and offensive actions. For the first time in his life, Bowen saw what it was like, what it was to look through the helmet of an orc. Of course, he lost, and rather badly if scores had been tabulated. Gortwag was a master of such battle. Yeah, okay, good. I mean, that would have been crazy if he fucking won that. But Bowen fought on for more than 3 hours before the judge reluctantly called a winner. "I will name the land Orsinium after the land of my fathers," said the victor. Bowen's first thought was that if he must lose to an orc, it was best that the battle was largely unwatched by his friends and family. As he left the courtyard to go to the bed he had longed for earlier in the evening, he saw Gortwag speaking to Tunner. Though he did not understand the language, he could see that they knew each other. When the Breton was in bed, he had a servant bring the old orc to him. "Tunner," he said kindly, "speak frankly to me. You wanted Lord Gortwag to win." "That is true," said Tunner. "But I did not fail you. You fought better than you would have fought 2 days hence, sir. I did not want Orsinium to be won by its king without a fight." Cool. How Orsinium passed to the Orcs. For some reason, I read that, and for some reason, my brain thought it was like how Orsinium passed from the Orcs, like the downfall of it. I was like, that doesn't make any fucking sense. Cool. Well, that's how Orsinium came to be, apparently. Let's see, how long is this next book? 18 pages. Do I want to read 18 pages right now? I think I'm just going to read another 16-pager. Immortal Blood by Anonymous. The moons and stars were hidden from sight, making that peculiar quiet night especially dark. The town guard had to carry torches to make their rounds, but the man who came to call at my chapel carried no light with him. I came to learn that Movarth Queen could see in the dark almost as well as the light, an excellent talent considering his interests were exclusively nocturnal. One of my acolytes brought him to me, and from the look of him, I at first thought he was in need of healing. He was pale to the point of opalescence? Palescence? Fuck, I know that word, but goddamn, I've never actually said it. With a face that looked like it had been once been very handsome before some unspeakable suffering. The dark circles under his eyes bespoke exhaustion, but the eyes themselves were alert, intense, almost insane. He quickly dismissed and also his eyes were red, but yeah, that's neither here nor there. He quickly dismissed my notion that he himself was ill, though he did want to discuss a specific disease. Vampirism. I mean, come on, bro. Like, how much more obvious can you make it? He said, and then paused at my quizzical look. I was told that you were someone I should seek out for help understanding it. Who told you that? I asked with a smile. Tessina Gray. I immediately remembered her. A brave, beautiful knight who had needed my assistance separating fact from fiction on the subject of the vampire. It had been 2 years, and I had never heard whether my advice had proved effective. You've spoken to her. How is her ladyship? I asked. Dead, Movarth replied coldly. And then, responding to my shock, he added to perhaps soften the blow. She said your advice was invaluable, at least for the one vampire. When last I talked to her, she was tracking another. It killed her. Then the advice I gave her was not enough, I sighed. Why do you think it would be enough for you? I was a teacher once myself, years ago, he said. Not in a university. A trainer in the Fighters Guild, But I know that if a student doesn't ask the right questions, the teacher cannot be responsible for his failure. I intend to ask you the right questions. And that he did. For hours, he asked questions and I answered what I could, but he never volunteered any information about himself. He never smiled. He only studied me with those intense eyes, the eyes of his, committing every word I said to memory. Finally, I turned the questioning around. You said you were a trainer at the Fighters Guild. Are you on an assignment for them? No, he said curtly, and finally I could detect some weariness in those feverish eyes of his. I would like to continue this tomorrow night, if I could. I need to get some sleep and absorb this. You sleep during the day, I smiled. To my surprise, he returned the smile, though it was more of a grimace. When tracking your prey, you adapt their habits. The next day, he did return with more questions, these ones very specific. He wanted to know about the vampires of Eastern Skyrim. Eastern Skyrim? Who the fuck are those? I told him about the most powerful tribe, the Volkihar. The Volkihar in the west, though! They're in West Skyrim, Northwest Skyrim. Paranoid and cruel, whose very breath could freeze their... that's gonna bother me. Whose very breath could freeze their victims' blood in their veins. That I don't think is true. I explained to him how they lived beneath the ice of remote and haunted lakes. Kind of true. Yeah, no, that actually is true. There is one that they do. It's not a frozen lake, though. Whatever. It's probably also not Volkihar. But if you're a high enough level, they're Volkihar, so, Never venturing into the world of men except to feed. Movarth is such a fucking vampire name, dude. That's crazy. Movarth Bequeen listened carefully and asked more questions into the night, until at last he was ready to leave. I will not see you for a few days, he said, but I will return and tell you how helpful your information has been. True to his word, the man returned to my chapel shortly after midnight 4 days later. There was a fresh scar on his cheek, but he was smiling, that grim but satisfied smile of his. Your advice helped me very much, he said, but you should know that the Volkihar have an additional ability you didn't mention. They can reach through the ice of their lakes without breaking it. Bruh, what? It was quite a nasty surprise, being grabbed from below without any warning. How remarkable, I said with a laugh, and terrifying. You're lucky you survived. I don't believe in luck. I believe in knowledge and training. Your information helped me, and my skill at melee combat sealed the bloodsucker's fate. I've never believed in weaponry of any kind. Too many unknowns. Even the best swordsmith has created a flawed blade, but you know what your body is capable of. I know I can land 1,000 blows without losing my balance, provided I get the first strike. The first strike, I murmured. So you must never be surprised. That is why I came to you, said Movarth. You know more than anyone alive about these monsters, in all their cursed varieties across the land. Now you must tell me about the vampires of northern Valenwood. I did as he asked, and once again his questions taxed my knowledge. There were many tribes to cover. The Samu, who were indistinguishable from Bosmer, except when seen by candlelight. The Kirilth, who could disintegrate into mist. The Yekef, who swallowed men whole. The dread Telboth, who preyed on children, oh my god, and eventually taking their place in the family, waiting patiently for years before murdering them all in their unnatural hunger. Is that what a fucking Babette is in Skyrim? Once again, he bade me farewell, promising to return in a few weeks, and once again he returned as he said, just after midnight. This time, Movarth had no fresh scars, but he again had new information. You were wrong about the Kirilth being unable to vaporize when pushed underwater, he said, patting my shoulder fondly. Fortunately, they cannot travel far in their mist form, and I was able to track it down. It must have surprised it fearfully. Your field knowledge is becoming impressive, I said. I should have an acolyte like you decades ago. Now tell me, he said, of the vampires of Cyrodiil. I told him what I could. There was but one tribe in Cyrodiil, a powerful clan who had ousted all other competitors, much like the Imperials themselves had done. Their true name was unknown, lost in history, but they were experts at concealment. If they kept themselves well fed, They were indistinguishable from living persons. They were cultured, more civilized than the vampires of the provinces, preferring to feed on victims while they were asleep, unaware. They will be difficult to surprise, Movarth frowned, but I will seek one out and tell you what I learn. And then you will tell me of the vampires of High Rock, and Hammerfell, and Elsewhere, and Blackmarsh, and Morrowind, and the Somerset Isles, yes? Holy smokes. I nodded, knowing then that this was a man on an eternal quest. He wouldn't be satisfied with but the barest hint of how things were. He needed to know it all. He did not return for a month, and on the nights he did, I could see his frustration and despair, though there were no lights burning in my chapel. I failed, he said, as I lit a candle. You were right, I cannot find a single one. I brought the light up to my face and smiled. He was surprised, even stunned by the pallor of my flesh, the dark hunger in my ageless eyes, and the teeth. Oh yes, I think the teeth definitely surprised the man who could not afford to be surprised. I haven't fed in 72 hours, I explained, as I fell on him. He did not land the first blow or the last. Well, goddamn. I feel like I've read that book before. I don't know if I read it just like on my own at some point, or if I've actually read the book in the past, but I feel like I definitely have read that. At some point, I don't know. I'm not too sure. But anyway, that's another 3 books down from the list. We still got a lot to go. I must say, we definitely do still have a lot more to go. But yeah, that's going to do it for today. When next we return, we're just going to move over to the next seat, and we're going to read some more books. That Bollywag tail just went from the fucking table, off that wall, I think off the roof, off the floor, and landed way the fuck over here. That was freaking crazy. Let's try that again. Wow, that was absolutely fucking wild. But that's going to do it for this episode. This is a shitty-ass fucking view from this angle. Well, you can still see Bernice. That's cool. Yeah, until the next time. Goodbye.
Cause I don't wanna see the glow without you. Refuse to even leave my home without you. Or my brain's gonna explode without you. I don't even know how to cope without you. Cause I don't wanna see the glow without you. Refuse to even leave my home without you. Or my brain's gonna explode without you. I don't even know how to cope without you.